colleagues, a handout. It is a holiday gift to a collection of giant internet companies to increase their profits at the expense of the consumer. And Mr. President, before I actually begin my remarks, Senator Franken, I see, is on the floor as well, and I would just like the public to know how important his leadership has been on these issues. He and I have partnered on these issues ever since he came to the Senate, and he was on the key committee, the Judiciary Committee. He's been a go-to figure in a key spot on this issue. And I just want, as we continue this discussion, Senator Warren's terrific presentation, I know my colleague is going to speak on this as well, I just want the public to know that Senator Franken has made a big, big difference for the consumer on these issues. And those of us who have been toiling in these precincts are very appreciative of what he's done. Mr. President, I want, first of all, for people to even understand what net neutrality is, because I think Senator Franken and I have talked about this over the years, a little confusion about what it is. Net neutrality means that after you pay your internet access fee, you get to go where you want, when you want, and how you want. It is the essence of ensuring that everybody gets a fair shake, that all bits are created equal. It is the foundation of what has kept the internet free and open. And I think before I get into my kind of prepared remarks, I want people to understand what happens if you don't have net neutrality. If you don't have net neutrality, in effect, big companies can manipulate who is going to win and who is going to lose in the marketplace. And they will continue to manipulate who wins and who loses until and after we get both fewer services and the consumer gets higher prices. So this is not some kind of abstract discussion. And let me just flesh out some of these remarks for a few minutes, because I know my colleagues have been waiting as well. Since the origins of the internet, the defining feature has been that all information, all bits, as we know it, get the same fair shake. If you're a big company or a mom-and-pop ice cream shop with a website, your content gets to everybody's home at the same speed. That's what net neutrality is all about. Net neutrality keeps internet service providers from favoring one type of content over another. Now, the market has changed since 2006 because the market for access to the internet has changed. Where once there were legions of dial-up providers and DSL resellers, we were seeing a few monopolies and duopolies dominating neighborhoods across the country. With their power to dictate where you could go and what you could see on the net, they had and continue to have the power to suppress those sites and those services that you would have chosen yourself in a free marketplace, driving them out of business. And I thought, again, to lay out what this means for people who are following this. That means instead of Netflix, YouTube, or Amazon, you could be forced to get your video content from something called Go90, whatever the heck that is. It certainly isn't a service that has been able to compete in a free internet market, but all that changes when Verizon can charge you more to get to YouTube or Facebook than it costs to reach their own service. Without strong net neutrality protections, AT&T might provide, and we always put it in quotes, free data for customers streaming HBO. Pretty good if you watch HBO, but it could, without net neutrality starve other creators of the subscribers necessary to survive until soon enough, as Senator Franken has pointed out in some of our discussions, free data is gone. That's it. Free data goes away, and the American consumer, which is my fear, when you think about what it really means to somebody sitting in Minnesota at home. I see my colleague, Senator Merkley, from Oregon as well. You know, the free data goes away under what I described, and the consumer at home in Minneapolis or Oregon is stuck with fewer choices at higher prices than they have today. That is what the loss of net neutrality means. I care deeply, as my colleagues do, about innovation in startups and small businesses. Senator Warren was eloquent on this point. There are going to be a lot of people who aren't a startup. So they're going to say, what does it mean to me? What it means, as I have just kind of walked people through an example, is that that typical person is going to be stuck with fewer choices at higher prices. Now, 2 years ago, Tom Wheeler, then the head of the Federal Communications Commission, put in place a strong framework, something with teeth that was enforceable. It's called Title II of the Communications Act, to make sure that the government, the FCC, had the tools to protect net neutrality. Now, Chairman Wheeler, like Chairman Pai, worked for industry for much of his career in Washington, but rather than serve his former employers, Tom Wheeler said, I'm going to use my experience in how companies operate, how they treat consumers. Tom Wheeler said, I'm going to use the experience I have working in the private sector to design and implement constructive and effective consumer protections. What a contrast between the two chairs of the Federal Communications Commission. Both of them from industry. Both of them did well in industry. And we consider that a good thing in America, that you have a prospering private economy. Tom Wheeler used it and that expertise to help the public. That's not what we're seeing today. Now, Mr. President, there isn't any need to fix what isn't broken. There's strong net neutrality protections in place right now. Since the 2015 rules went into place, our economy has grown up around this leading principle of equal access to information and customers. The day before Thanksgiving, Chairman Pai released his proposal to strike down the 2015 rules that ensure real net neutrality and would also prevent states from introducing their own approach to net neutrality. Rather than listening to the millions of voices that spoke up on behalf of real net neutrality and against his proposal to allow pay-for-play, or what I really call, Senator Franken, trickle-down telecommunications policy. Just let the big guys make as much money as they want, and maybe something eventually trickles down to rural Minnesota or rural Oregon. Chairman Pai is going to keep pushing pay-for-play and is expected to ignore the will of the public and demolish net neutrality rules. The first key vote is tomorrow, December 14th, and what I've been doing and spending a good chunk of my waking hours, obviously we've got the tax issue, enormously important. This is enormously important too, to tell the American people this is a time to make their voices heard. My message to the American people on net neutrality is get loud. This debate is far from over. We know Chairman Pai plays a strong hand tomorrow. There's no question about that. But then it goes to the courts. A number of our colleagues are looking at approaches here on the floor. So I want, as much as anything, to make sure that the American people know that we understand, Senator Franken, Senator Merkley, political change doesn't start in government buildings in Washington, D.C. and trickle down. It's bottoms up. And if ever there was an issue for bottoms up, it's net neutrality. Not only are the majority of Americans opposed to Mr. Pai's proposal, many of the comments he solicited for input are fake. These fake comments have been attributed to bots, and false identities are linked with Russian IP addresses. Any argument that this agency, the Federal Communications Commission, had a transparent process with comments from the American people is not true. This is not government for the people. This is government for the special interest. Now, just a couple of other points, and let me wrap this up for my colleagues to be able to have the floor. The chairman, Chairman Pai, has been out there arguing, falsely in my view, that without Title II protections, big cable will make more money and use those profits to invest in infrastructure. This is what I call the trickle-down theory about telecommunications. First of all, the existing regime was called Title II, tough rules. It's not been a roadblock to investment in broadband. In fact, cable giants have continued to invest in their broadband infrastructure even when strong net neutrality protections were put in place in 2015. Publicly available documents show that investment by internet service providers was 5% higher during the 2 years after strong net neutrality rules were adopted than for the 2 years prior. Comcast, for example, has increased its investment by 25% since 2013. Big Cable and their own statements show that none of the major internet service providers told their investors that net neutrality protections negatively impact their investments. That is based on publicly verifiable documents. So what we have is Chairman Pai making this case that, oh my goodness, Western civilization is going to end if we don't get, without getting rid, if Mr. Chairman Pai is making the argument that net neutrality provisions with teeth are going to be pretty much the end of investment and sort of Western civilization as we know it. Public documents show otherwise. Publicly available documents show otherwise. Now, the FCC chairman once claimed that a policy of voluntary net neutrality would be another way to go. Any talk of a voluntary solution to net neutrality is just nonsense. Allowing a net neutrality provider to follow net neutrality, that has got about as much chance of working. There's about as much chance that the big cable companies will honor voluntary net neutrality as there is to get Ava and William Wyden, my 10-year-old twins, to voluntarily limit the number of desserts they have at dinner. Not going to happen. Not going to happen, folks. Not going to work for open and fair access to the internet. Wouldn't work with Ava and Will Wyden. On the same exact day that the Federal Communications Commission produced this rulemaking to roll back Title II, Comcast removed the pledge on its website that it does not prioritize internet traffic or create paid fast lanes. So much for voluntary policy. In my view, the only way that the potential of the internet can be fully tapped is by ensuring that one form of content is not provided a preference over another form of content by their internet service provider. The Trump Federal Communications Commission is barreling ahead to blow up this level playing field that is so crucial to innovation and free speech. And I close only by way of saying that this is also a lifeline for the startups. Those startups are dreaming of being the next YouTube, Google, or eBay. This is not about Google or eBay. This is about the startups. And I would be staying to hear my colleague, Senator Franken, make his remarks on net neutrality, other than the fact we're about to start the tax conference. But I close my remarks the way I opened them. Senator Franken has been our go-to person on these issues since he came to the Senate. We are so grateful that he looked at this issue through the prism of what it means for the person without power and clout. And I want to thank him for his leadership.
Mr. President.
Senator from Minnesota.
I would thank the senator from Oregon, my friend, for your extraordinarily kind words. You, too, have been a leader introducing the first net neutrality piece in 2006, before I came here. Mr. President, I rise today to talk about tomorrow's vote at the FCC on a proposal that would throw out the strong net neutrality rules that Americans have fought so hard for. Rules that ensure that all content on the internet receives equal treatment from broadband providers, regardless of who owns it or how deep their pockets are. Plain and simple, these